Hey
All
guys,
right.
we're here on a funny holiday week. I just came back from holiday. I'm sure all of you had a day or maybe two off this week. Um, we're here to talk about building an advanced cybersecurity stack for your MSP this week. Um, We've got a special guest with us. We'll do a round of intros in a moment, but first, I'm Matt Fish, founder of Fort Mesa. We help MSPs own their customers' cybersecurity roadmap. Jason, you want to do a quick intro?
Yeah, Jason Whitehurst. I own a company called Service Provider Partners. We're renaming in the next couple of weeks to Future Safe. Figured we'd start with the logo. We provide a full stack of cyber solutions only to MSPs, who in turn then resell that solution to their client. And as a white glove provider, my team and I handle all the cyber security back end so the MSP can do what they're best at, which is direct servicing of the client and moving down some new avenues of revenue like compliance. So.
All right. All right. And I guess I'm Zach Keeney. I am with Fort Mesa as well. I'm our channel sales director. Prior to my time with Fort Mesa, I actually contracted some MSPs for a small business that I owned in the restaurant space. And I'm looking forward to learning more here during this call.
So, cyber criminals didn't take a week off this week. We saw ISOs were busy. Jason, I know you made an announcement this week in your private cohort. What's new this week, guys? I mean, I just came out of the woods off the mountain here. So what's and the first thing I picked up my phone and it's message from Jason flying into my phone, messages from the ISO, like.
Yeah, so there's been a number of compromises that have been specifically related to, again, business email compromise is a number one, target of attack. And they recognize that, businesses have a hard time, dealing with business email compromises because, again, it's attacking the lowest common denominator, which, of course, is the end user. And, there's a Russian group that, had
it's always Russian groups. Every time I see an article, it's a Russian group.
Well, when the Russian-Ukraine war started, we held a kind of, intro to a new situation conference, and we predicted about a 500% increase in ransomware and BCs, and that was just because all of these guys, these threat actor groups, right, and there's a bunch of them, they change names all the time and switch people around. Now that there's a war in Russia and Ukraine, they went from having to hide, kind of in the, most people think they hide in the dark web. They don't. They all hide in Telegram now. But,
explain what you mean when you say they hide in Telegram for those of our listeners who might not have as deep a background as you.
Yeah. So when we look at how threat actors communicated not only to other threat actors, but when they communicated with those they had compromised, because you got to get paid, right? That's the whole concept.
Right.
They would operate traditionally in dark websites. So if you have a site that ends in like .onion, that's a dark website that they would generally operate within these dark websites where they would communicate with. Whether it's us negotiating with the threat actor or, breach counsel, however that manifested. That started changing last year where because of the end-to-end encryption capability of Telegram, they realized that they could build Telegram groups and enforce end-to-end encryption in Telegram groups, have invite only into those groups. Government, nobody else can get into it. That encryption's unbreakable, and so by and large, they are, safe from, safe from the folks who might shut them down. And it's a lot easier for someone who isn't familiar with that space and may have been compromised for the first time to install Telegram, set up an account, go over here, and
And historically, the Russian government has provided some cover for Telegram, really shielding them from international norms and regulations. So the criminals are getting away with that on Telegram. The people at Telegram know about it, and that's the platform they've created.
Yeah, and so look, I'm a member of a handful of these ransomware Telegram groups that are loosely moderated by them for people with whom they work to do whatever, and that's where some of my information comes from. But so they live within these Telegram groups and communicate that way. And some of the information that we put out to folks with whom we communicate have a confidential Slack channel that's comprised of a small handful of really strong security people. Matthew's in that group, and then I have a larger Slack group, and then of course there are other communities like Tech Tribe, Technology Marketing Toolkit, where we try to disseminate that information when it comes up. There was another surprising another compromise that was pretty surprising that picked up a network auditing Netrix, NETWRAX auditing platform, which I've used and other security people have used.
Yeah, that's the one that landed in my mailbox when I came back from holiday this week. Yeah.
And so they had a complete environment owning compromise, and the threat actors had done a pretty good job of not making people aware ahead of time. And so they had been compromising Netrix pretty heavily. There is the Fortinet firewall, CV, kind of a major risk with Fortinet firewalls, even currently patched Fortinet firewalls. And for whatever reason, I think there's still 330,000 some odd Fortinet firewalls that haven't been patched. And a lot of times, those are EOL Fortinets that they couldn't get an update for if they wanted to. We see a lot of those, but that's a pretty major risk to carry forward.
Yeah, well, we had that Barracuda disclosure from last month, and I think Barracuda decided you got to mail that hardware back to really get it sanitized, and that was there's a lot of people that are just not going to mail the hardware back, right?
And that's Barracuda's way of saying, let's roll you into another hardware agreement, right? And
well, I think that the attackers got in so deep that there was no patching that one. They were in already, right? Yeah. I saw a really interesting piece of statistics on how the Ukraine war has impacted BECs, other types of cyber crime, with all the sanctions going up, right? The cyber criminals really don't have to worry about international pressure, via the local government. But one of the things that's happened is those assets that are largely, a lot of them are semi-private, right? They're sponsored by the government, but they're also free agents. And just in the last few months, I don't know on what basis from Russia's perspective, it seems like they've redeployed some of those assets. And it's not clear why, but those cybercrime apparatuses grew massively, really to inflict damage on Ukraine for the last year or a little bit more. And those assets have been redeployed, and they're no longer focused on Ukraine right now. As of the last couple of months, it seems like whatever those assets were that were created are now reaching out internationally, and we're seeing vastly increased cybercrime campaigning in terms of number of infections, number of attacks, versus 18 months ago. And so we the war created this huge class of cyber assets, and those weapons. If Ukraine was cleaned up tomorrow and they were in a safe space, all these cyber weapons are out on the battlefield now, and they are in the form of both tools that are created, but also whole teams of people that have worked together, and now don't have a war mission, right?
Right.
So that's pretty scary.
Yeah, and answer your question directly, Zach, it has everything to do with the fact, and Matthew laid it out, but before the Russia-Ukraine war, these guys had to hide, and they had to be really careful about how they were doing what they were doing.
Sure.
Russia-Ukraine war, nobody cared to hide anymore. They didn't have to, right? There were other
If
things.
anything, they become a piece of the operation. Maybe not officially, right? Not on the books for them, but
you have to understand the core function of this war for everybody who's not actively fighting it is to leach their tool sets and their weapons into the theater of operation to test them to see how they work.
Sure.
Right? If you developed a new tank buster and you are, the provider of said tank buster,
yeah,
right? There's no better place than to test it with Ukraine and to be able to say it's been in an active theater of operation, right? And they do it with physical weapons and they also do it with virtual weapons. Right now, the number one source of cyber attacks is the U.S. The U.S. Financial system, and that's because, as far as Putin and his folks are concerned, we destroyed the value of the ruble, so they're going to come and wreak havoc upon us. The other one is critical infrastructure. We've dealt with a number of ransomware cases recently that deal with critical infrastructure, water treatment plants, electrical substations. And once you get past a business network to the SCADA network being where all the logic controllers are that control those pumps and those systems, it's a lot harder to figure out what those guys are doing. And when they say, look, we'll threaten to expose your customer list, is a whole lot different than we'll poison the water system in your city.
Right.
Right. Absolutely. So Dallas had a major attack not too long ago. I knew about it 2 weeks beforehand. Couldn't say anything. And one of my employees lives in Dallas, and I'm like, look, you might want to go, just be hyper vigilant. And Dallas announced it last week, I think, that they had a major ransomware event. And the real threat, and I'll let Matthew address this, the real threat is the time differential between when it happens and when somebody actually discloses what the heck's going on.
Right. Well, in the case of water systems, right, there's small pumps in the water system, right, that release a number of chemicals, right? People think of chlorine, right? And you can taste chlorine. It's very obvious when there's too much chlorine in the water, right? But there's other things they put in those water systems that are parts per million, and someone can run those pumps up to 1,000x, 10,000x, right? They can shut down, they can open and close other valves, and that water runs through the system quite quickly. In minutes or hours, right? It's coming out the taps. And our current disclosure practices are not really built for that.
And that leads right directly into incident response planning, right?
Well, I don't know that we could have queued this up any better, but with that, I think we're ready to move on into our next segment here.
Not that we planned that.
So there it is. Yeah, let's throw it on the screen here. So,
and if I could have a second, Matt, to kind of tie it all together. So to summarize, we've seen over the last 18 months a significantly increased number of attacks, either from foreign agents or otherwise. Why that matters to MSPs, right? These attackers that are looking to either hurt the dollar or looking to impact water supply in some way, they're not looking at, well, which MSP is running this aspect of services. right? They're not looking at, they're just looking at how they can impact. So we have to be hyper vigilant on our end on how we prepare for that, how we set our clients and teams up to be able to handle these increased number of attacks. So we're trying out a new segment here where we discuss a control each week to try to break down the process into something that's a little bit more manageable, right? There's a ton of controls, and going through and learning all those controls is A, scary, B, extremely time consuming, and last, where do you even start? So we've made that choice for you guys, and we're starting at CIS Control version 8, number 17, incident response management, excuse me. And we think this is perfect for Jason because he's so in depth with this type of thing. So, Jason, what's the most important part of your incident response?
I think the most important part of an incident response plan is that all the players know what their roles are and they know what they should do and should not do, right? There's nothing more painful than watching an MSP trying to deal with a client compromise, having never done so. They don't have an incident response plan. They've done no incident response management. They don't have an incident response plan. The owner is sitting in his office calling the clients, explaining that there's a compromise and what's going on and trying to maintain some semblance of his business, while his engineers are sitting in their desks, trying to get the clients back online as fast as possible, therefore violating the insurance provider's forensics capture laws, forensics capture requirements, and negating insurance policies and causing all kinds of other problems. All of that goes back to there's a lack of an incident response plan. There's a lack of each person knowing what their roles are, and there's a lack of the training associated with the role assignment, right? What the role assignment is about is making sure that making that person aware of this is your responsibility, and then that person's identification of the training they need to execute on said responsibility. Having the proper incident response, everybody knows the outcome of having a proper plan, right? This is about when you are in an oh crap moment, everything's critical, everything's falling apart, right? You can pick up the phone and call me, but you need to have, an immediate response plan that not only, that's not only designed to, to make sure that everybody knows what their steps are and that they take them in the right order, and they stop when they're supposed to, or don't start till they're supposed to. But it goes back to making sure that the owner of the business, the MSP in this instance, can deal with what he needs to deal with from a customer perspective, because he knows his folks know what their steps and actions are, right? And there's nothing more painful than to watch a compromise of an MSP or the client of an MSP. When you talk to them a month before, they're like, "Oh, security, we're pretty good. Our guys are pretty decent security guys." Once they get in a compromise, all bets are off, right?
Right.
And so it's really painful to watch, and you don't have to.
We chose this one, 17.4, right? So this is out of the CIS control book, right? You could slice this up in NIST or ISO, and they're slightly different in terms of how they break down incident response into multiple pieces. I pulled this one because I find, first of all, the insurance forms have a checkbox, right? Something about an incident response, right? And it frequently says something like, do you have an incident response plan, right? And sometimes through encouragement from their MSPs, or sometimes out of their own volition, and a client will say, "Oh yeah, we've got an endpoint tool, right? We have a security guy we know of that we could call, right?" They say, "Yes, we have a plan," right? But then comes arbitration, right? An actual attack happens, right? And let's hope there's not a regulator involved, right? Because they can do much teethier things, right? But let's say there's an insurance claim, and you go to arbitration, and the insurance company says, oh, you said yes to an incident response plan, right? And then they say, well, what's in the plan, right? And here's the commercially reasonable definition, right? Do you have policies, plans, procedures? Have you defined the roles? You mentioned this stuff, Jason. Have you trained people? Have you communicated to people what the plan is? Do people know how to communicate in an incident, right? So that you could do all these things, right? Have
Matt,
you assigned those roles?
do you mean to
Yeah.
tell me that it's important to communicate the plan that you have to the other people that have a role to play in the plan?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you not only do you have to have a reasonable plan, but if you haven't done these things, right? When that claim comes up, you will find that either the claim is denied, right, or the insurer will find the MSP liable, because the client may say, well, the MSP told me, and the MSP may say, well, we said no such thing, right? But if the MSP didn't get like an incident response waiver or something on file, right? Judges find favorably on those end client businesses. So, that's something to consider. Yeah.
Especially when they're contracting for a service, right? Imagine you're contracting for an organization to be, organizing all of your HR documents, all of your hiring and all of your payment material in terms of your payroll out. And then you come to find that they weren't actually doing that, and what they were doing instead was just sending checks to random people, and hoping that it worked out. I mean, you would lose your mind as a business owner. And it's the same thing in this situation. If you're saying as an MSP, we're going to provide you with X, Y, and Z in terms of incident response, and then you don't actually have a real plan set up, you should be held liable because you're putting somebody in a situation that's dangerous. It's like yelling fire in a movie theater.
Yeah, and we're getting increasingly signals out of the federal government and states that there's willingness to do some regulation here. We'll see what that looks like. It's not written yet, it's not draft yet, but there's a lot of signaling that it's going to happen, and soonish. As far as timelines for this kind of stuff goes. The other reason I put this up, guys, is I have found in my practice and working with our partners that when you have this conversation, the conversation we just had with the client, you don't just say, hey, you have a plan, you don't have a plan. You don't give them a one pager and call it a plan. You actually go through the process with your customer of developing these things. That's how you build willingness in your customer to invest in cybersecurity. They understand where the money's going. They understand the intent. And they understand that it's maybe not something reasonable that they can ignore. So it's important to go through the planning process with your client. It should be part of any end client cyber relationship, even if what comes out of that is, you know what, we're actually not at incident response. We have no capabilities, and that client better make sure that that's even permissible, right? If you don't have any personal data and it's only your own business at risk, right? Maybe that's okay. But
you have to assess that risk. You can't just say, well, there's things under the rug and it's probably okay.
So I think that's enough. We beat the horse on this one. Jason, anything you want to add on incident response planning? I mean,
a good starting place and ending place maybe for the folks.
No, I mean, look, it's. We spent months and months looking for a platform that we could recommend to even our 200 some odd MSP customers when we had this conversation with them, and we landed on Formation for good reason. But, I guess the whole idea here is just get started.
Yeah.
Just do something about having the proper platforms in place and the tool sets in place to make sure if you say you have an incident response plan, you do. Number two, I can give you some quick advice here. Number one, just start. Number two, Never fill out an insurance questionnaire for a client ever, never. That is a business process, not an IT or security process. You can give them a state of their environment, but never fill that questionnaire out, because if in fact they come back and their status isn't the same as when it was filled out, when a compromise happens, guess who's held accountable for filling that out? The MSP. I've seen it time and time and time again. All right. And then, the third one is, and this is loosely related, okay? But get your MSAs and your statement of works checked by counsel. Don't go use somebody else's stuff, right? Make sure you're fully covered, and make sure you're protected with the right, with the right resources. Those three are the biggest gotchas I've seen repeated over and over and over again.
So
that was establishing an incident response.
Yeah, that's what I mean by just getting started, right? There's more to an incident response. If I said go establish an incident response plan right now, then you're going to go to Google and look for an incident response plan Word doc you can download and fill out, and that may have nothing to do with your business. That's why I'm saying just get started. Find some, Fort Mesa, in my opinion, is a phenomenal place to start. So, that's what I would do.
So, Jason, with that, the reason we invited you on today is really to introduce you to our audience. Not specifically Future Safe as a brand, although I want to hear it, and I think our audience deserves to hear the value, because out of our partners, the value you bring to MSPs is unique. But I think I'm thinking more about the general capabilities you bring and how that changes their business, right? Go ahead.
So the whole reason I started doing what I'm doing, I'm in MSP space a long time. The whole reason why I started doing what I was doing is I recognized that there is a fundamental difference between an infrastructure skill set and a cybersecurity skill set. And to be able to provide that skill set to the end client, particularly if you're an MSP, can be incredibly difficult. And hiring people with the requisite cybersecurity skill set is quite a bit more expensive than most MSPs can manage, right? And, I think if you ask our clients, and we had a marketing team query our clients for this, was what's a value proposition? And really the value proposition isn't that we can sell a license for this, that, or the other. The value proposition was being able to be, that cybersecurity trusted advisor to the MSP themselves about what they were putting forth to their client. And yes, we provide a full stack of services that the MSP can get from us and sell to their client, but that's a byproduct. That's not the root cause of it, right? It comes down to having cybersecurity expertise that you're not paying for in a consumption basis, because you have these platforms that you're selling the client anyway, but you get a white glove service with it, right? So, and I think let me give you an example of kind of where that value comes in. We realized at the end of in September of last year, I finally said enough. I have 9 SecOps engineers. We had, a total of 11 dashboards that we had to support. That was a la carte to our various clients, from, SentinelOne to Checkpoint Enterprise to whatever. And every time I hired an engineer, he had to learn those platforms because it was their only choice. And then the clients had a la carte purchasing decisions. And I decided at that point, security was too complex, it was too expensive. And how in the world could somebody develop an incident response plan that spread across 10 different platforms? And how are you able to keep up with them, and how are you able to manage them? And so, so it's our job as the provider to be able to say, okay, first of all, to say enough's enough, to to be involved in these, incidents so that we can see who's doing what. I speak to insurance companies 3 times a month, and they pay me to talk about what's going on in the market. Why do I do that? I do that because I want to know what they're interested in, right? And the regulation that Matthew was talking about is coming as a byproduct. The insurance companies, for the first time in history, lost money on cybersecurity insurance policies last year. That's never happened.
How many times in history do you think insurance companies at the end of a year lost money on one of their verticals?
Incredibly.
Maybe none. Maybe
Yeah,
zero times in history.
There's Katrina, right? There's major outlier events, right? But last year really was not, like, from the perspective of cybercrime, was not an outlier year. It's simply that things have been getting progressively worse, and our response has not been getting progressively better, right? Yeah, we're upside down.
Same speed, right?
And and look, when I talk to these insurance companies, and their lobbyists are lobbying Congress incredibly hard to regulate the channel, because they recognize that we are the worst offenders of just not doing things the appropriate way and not respond from a cybersecurity perspective. And this is what I mean, right? I sit in arbitration, and it just kills me to hear this. And here's how it goes every single time. Mr. MSP, please put forth your cyber expert to be deposed about your stack and your process and your workflow so that we can talk about what happened. And the MSP says, we don't have that person. And the arbitration, or well, it's really not plaintiff in defense, but you get my point. For lack of ease of terms, the other side in arbitration says, well, your website says you're cyber experts, you're a one-stop shop, or you provide a full stack of cyber solutions. You don't even have a single person who can stand up to scrutiny and be qualified as a cyber expert in deposition. So you defrauded your client. You lied right on your website. A lot of times it doesn't get any further than that. You don't even get to the incident, right? That's enough of an issue. And, so that's kind of the first thing. And then, the insurers and the regulators are, now we have a lot of banking clients for obvious reasons. They're heavily regulated. And, those regulators are, from a cybersecurity perspective, are just absolutely brutal. And they have to be, especially now. And so we see those things happen. Now, to kind of, so the insurers have had enough of paying because of the dishonesty of certain MSPs saying, we are something we have zero expertise in, right? And so, so that, we have a lot of MSPs who, we have some $20 million MSPs and one-man shops, right? It just depends on, what people need. But we started last year, we said, look, there's too many dashboards. There's too many, there's too many platforms. There's too many steps involved in incident response plan. There's just too much. And, so we then started looking, okay, can we consolidate in any fashion? And so it's not up to the client to do that. It's up to us, the provider of said platforms, to do that, right? And we spent about 6 months and, found a very, very powerful platform out of the EU that has a couple million endpoints and is, FedRAMP, SOC 3, ISO, everything, and was quite powerful in the EU. Just didn't want to sell in the US, and so we tested their and the question is why? One dashboard, one SOC, one agent, all 11 security modules, everything you need to protect your client. And I was like, if this survives scrutiny, I'm all in, because now it simplifies greatly not only who we have to train for what and why, but from an incident response plan, that's when the rubber meets the road. We're in one forensic location, not 8, 9, 10, 7, 8 forensic locations. Right. The worst part of an incident response is what? Getting the forensic data together from 7, 9, 10 disconnected, discontiguous platforms. Somehow make a storyline that exists across those. Right. When you have a singular platform, you can do it in one place, and that is saves an incredible amount of time. Time equals problem resolution, during a critical incident.
Right.
And so, we spent 6 months testing this platform, beating it to death. We have ransomware virtual machines from CISA that we beat it with, and just threw everything but the kitchen sink at it, and then we provided our feedback to them. But by and large, Heimdall did an incredible job. But we had to put a whole nother layer of visibility in there for the MSSP, who could see from a threat hunting level across all the clients in one pane of glass. Nobody offers that, period, end of story, anywhere else. And so that's our job to do that. We don't get paid to do that. We don't charge that as a line item. We can't bill people for that. But what does that all go back to? Why do we even do that in the first place? Because, and I know this, right? I've had multiple conversations with Matthew. If I'm back to Matthew, and he would say, "What are you doing, Jason?" And I'm like, "Look, watch me juggle, because I have all the, where did the compromise start?" And that's the other problem with the MSP, who's self-managed from a cyber perspective, right? You telling me you can manage your dashboards and alerts and consoles and dropped agents and all the pieces and parts that go with that, and do it profitably? Most guys who do it on themselves are upside down. They just don't have the volume. But again, I'll go back to why we did that in the first place, why we went seeking somebody like Fort Mesa for our clients, was to get some consistency in communication, some consistency in expectation, and some consistency in service delivery between us. And what's the common denominator there? It's being compliant and managing your expectations. And so, and look, I looked at 11 different platforms. Same as mine, but Mesa was where we went. So
I like the managing expectations piece, because a lot of these organizations want to move through this process quickly, right? You want to get where you look in the mirror, you're like, oh, well, this isn't what I want. I want to get to Beachbody now. But that's not how the process works. And the same is true with cybersecurity. If you don't have the people and the process elements in place already, you can't just hire the people and process elements, right? You can develop them over time, but of the three pieces of cybersecurity, technology is only one, and you as a leader have to take the steps to train your team and ensure that processes are done correctly. So I think
Future Safe's, to go back to Future Safe's value, Jason, we're getting pretty geeky here. And cyber's a geeky space, but MSPs that have these established customer relationships, they're trusted advisors. They've known their clients a long time. In many cases, despite this COVID cycle we went through, we're still walking into those client offices, right, and shaking hands, understanding their businesses. But the reality is that a business that does that, right, is not necessarily geared up. And you did mention this early on, to have that expertise to be watching all of these panels and differentiating and saying, okay, this is an annoying thing that happens to a machine, but it's ignorable. This is an alert that should probably be cleaned up, but it's not a compromise. This is a compromise that needs minor cleanup, but the impact is not great. Oh, wait, this one's a breach and we need to do lifecycle management. And not only does the MSP need to get called, but probably the client needs to get called now, right? And so as an MSSP, you're bringing that skill set to the table, and that set of people, right, as an overlay, right? And so MSPs don't have to build that up themselves. They work with Future Safe, and you're bringing that overbuild, right?
You're one of the 3 pillars already ready to go.
Yeah, we're a white glove provider. We recognize and understand that if we sell a security, Heimdall or Sentinel-1 or Checkpoint or whatever, unlike a lot of folks, they go, here's your license. Good luck. Let us know if you have a problem. We are a white glove provider. We manage all the alerts, right? We respond to them, and we operate behind the scenes. So we never talk to the MSP's clients. There's never a reason to. We communicate to the MSP, and we deal with it that way. But yeah, we deal with dropped agent tracking and agent updates and what we call rogue scanning, where we scan for machines that don't have the proper agents but should. We give Cyber CNS away to our clients for free. I'm Cyber CNS at CISO, and we do all their support, so I can do that. And why do I give it away for free? Because we need to be able to see that client's, scanning resultant set of data, and reporting. And then, we need to recommend to our clients, and this is a conversation we've had of late, particularly of our clients who have regulated clients, healthcare, educate, you get it, right? And say, where do we go? Now we have the protections in place. Where do we go to have the right tool sets to build the compliance things that we need to build, but also we need to recommend to our clients? We're not getting in that space. Why? Because we're not experts at it. We do this thing over here.
Should we cover some of these comments quick before we move on to our next segment?
Yeah.
Let's. So this one, I like
Jeffrey's. Jeffrey summarized my entire.
We'll get to Jeffrey next. So David's talking about storms, right?
Yeah.
But he's talking about how the insurers have just quit offering when it's not profitable for them, right?
Offer the insurance.
And that's what we're seeing in cyber, right? We're seeing that clients and clients, both small businesses and enterprise, are no longer insurable if they don't have the highly differentiated cyber services, not just product, but services deployed and in place. And a lot of MSPs aren't skilled for it. And if your clients are losing insurance, they're uninsurable, or you need them to become insurable. And I'm not talking about these toy $20,000 policies, right? We're talking about real business operation coverage, right? Real liability coverage, the $1 million, $2 million, $5 million, $10 million policies that people really need.
That protect you when things actually go wrong when you need them to.
Yeah, and if you don't, we had Fifth Wall on a few weeks ago, and they're just saying that, like, look, you're just not going to get that insurance product at all unless you have these things in place. And if you as the MSP aren't geared up, you need to find someone that is. Here's Jeffrey. You want to take this one?
Who are you? Which one of us are you talking to?
I'll take it.
Jason liked this one.
I liked what he said. He just, I did my thing, and Jeffrey, in the middle of what I was talking about, summarized what I had in my head. So that was pretty cool. But, it's like, how can any MSP claim to have a cybersecurity program if they don't perform and identify and permission creep plans to establish a baseline of employees? This is probably not going to surprise most of you, and even the attendees. Most and when I say most, it's people I see, but I also hear it around the place, right? Most MSPs don't protect themselves with the same tools they sell other people.
Sure.
Which I never understood, right?
It's like a doctor not taking their own advice. I butchered that. You know what I mean?
At the end of the day, we try to NFR whatever we can. When I negotiate with a platform vendor, I try my best to NFR it for the seller, the MSP, because then I can say, it's free, dude. Just put it on your stuff, right?
Right.
And we see it all the time. The MSP is so underprotected. And Jeffrey's right, too, about identifying internally where your risks are, right? How many people can raise their hand when you say, if I went and removed domain admin from my text, they would think I'm going to fire them the next day?
Yeah,
right?
They think it's an ego thing, right?
Yes, they think it's an ego thing. I have to be global admin, domain admin. I have to be world admin. And if you take that away from me, then you're either going to fire me or it's a culture thing and I'm going to be unhappy, right?
Yeah.
So, the right approach is I don't want any rights unless you make me have them or I need them to do my job. That's the right mental approach, right? But we see the opposite, the antithesis of that. And so we get one engineer that is super busy. He doesn't read the emails closely as he should. He gets a BDC. They sit resident. They capture all his credentials. They're usually smart enough not to put them in a browser, so they capture his credentials, right? What do? They do TOTP ghosting, where they can immediately replicate that TOTP key to be put into a browser or to fill in if the right security is not in place. But they'll just hit resident, capture those credentials, and then they've got everything. Everything? Everything. And then they'll go in and shut down the BDR, kill all the backups, right? And then when we look at what happened, here's the painful part. A lot of times we can see that compromise show up a month before. We call it dwell time, right? We can see it show up a month before. Here's where it happened. But because these guys manage their own security and they're so busy, they don't even recognize that that's what it was, right? Mm-hmm. And so it just continues to move on. And then we find the alert in a folder in their inbox because of forwarding rules, because everybody is so stinking busy. So I'm going to wrap up with that. And you know, I'm on this soapbox. I could go forever. Just understand, you know, that we all have a finite amount of time and a finite amount of revenue. And there are ways to address that stuff where you remain profitable, but are also the key provider for your income. And so I'll give it back to Matthew really quick.
With that, we're just gonna jump into our next segment here. So Brian, I think we want to hear how you think this impacts, best practices in the sales process with the end client.
Yeah, for sure. I have a few thoughts. For starters, I love some of these comments as well. So
clean up on the fly, Brian. What a job to have, Brian.
Oh, and by the way, intros quick because you missed that round.
Good job. Go ahead.
Wait, what do you want me to do?
Tell us about who you are, since we didn't get a quick intro and before you get going.
Oh, before I give all my expertise. Sure.
Yes.
My name is Brian Gillette. I have a company called Feel Good MSP. I'm an end-to-end sales process development company where I help MSPs communicate the value of what we sell and sell to the right clients at full price. So everything I hear in all these conversations is I always bring it back to, great, how can I make money with this though? Because otherwise, what's the point? Because I'm not a not-for-profit cybersecurity good Samaritan. As much as some of us are, but we're not-for-profits by accident because we don't know how to communicate this, right? Yeah. So first of all, I just wanted to key off of Jeffrey's comment as well. How can you claim to be a MSP if to have a cybersecurity program if you don't do all this stuff? What's interesting to me is I've been in the managed services game not too long, since about 2017. I do not have a technical background. So I know how to talk about a lot of these things, but I don't know how to do them because I know how to sell them.
The best sales guys don't, by the way. The best sales guys don't, by the way.
Yeah, I'm not an engineer. That's why I know how to ask the right questions and keep my mouth shut long enough, because I don't try to solve all the problems in the sales process. But I think to Jeffrey's point, for starters, I think what an MSP is, that definition is actively changing every day. Yeah. What a managed service provider was in 2016 was help desk plus RMM agents plus web root. You're a fully managed service provider, right? You're just a break fix provider who billed monthly. Not for profit, need security, huge market. Yeah, that's true. But anyway, as cybersecurity, sort of the threats have obviously evolved, the needs have evolved, the landscape has evolved, the workplace evolved, blah, blah, blah. MSPs have had to evolve. But now, really, to offer a real managed service offering, you have to essentially be an MSSP, because that's really, they're oftentimes conflated from the end user's perspective. They think you manage all the IT, so you do all the security stuff, right? Now, is that technically true? I think everybody's definition of MSP is different. So what that ultimately means is you have to be able to provide all the things that they need in order to stay secure, but you do not have to in-house all of those things. I think you can absolutely be a managed service provider without having the most in-depth cybersecurity tools, but you can't tell people you're offering them if you're not. I like to think of like the MSP is like the quarterback of the technical team, right? And the cyber guys are like, whatever, fill in the blank, the linemen, pick a position. And the customer is the general manager, right? They ultimately they're responsible for the success of the entire thing, but they don't know how to throw a football. They're not on the field. They can't take a hit. We can. That's our job. But as the MSP, you're the one who ultimately governs and manages the client relationship. Fair? That's our job. Manage the client's relationship, manage the perceived value. All that stuff is up to us. It's not up to you if you're running an MSP. You don't have to climb under every desk and turn every screwdriver, right? You don't have to do every password reset. That's not your job if you run an MSP. Your job is to build a team who can manage those responsibilities. I think selling cyber is the exact same way. Leveraging an MSSP whose job is way more narrow than yours is by far the lowest lift way of competing with what is becoming the standard of like a full cyber solution. Agreed? Because
if I could add to that, not just competing, but also protecting yourself, which I think is an important element of this as well.
Absolutely. Like, it's not a good look when you are the MSP and you get hacked, or when your client gets hacked, or when you insist that they get cyber insurance. When you sign them on, you go, well, we got to get you ready for cyber insurance. Then you put in your tool, and then they get denied a policy because you didn't actually equip them well, or they got a terrible policy with a super high premium because you just weren't equipped.
It's a good way to lose a customer.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good way to lose your reputation instantly, right? All this comes back to great. We can sit here and we can have an echo chamber of all the things we want to do, but if we can't get the client to see the value of this, it is quite literally of no value to us to have all these tools if we can't sell, implement, and execute it. The greatest MSSP, if they're not client facing, they need the MSPs to go and round up the endpoints, right?
Yep.
For you to observe. So what the missing piece is, I think that the narrative about cyber should change. When I was selling managed service, I'll be honest, like pre-COVID especially, I mean, I sold through 2020, but pre-COVID, cybersecurity was like, yeah, we have a cybersecurity plan. We'll keep you secure. And people went, sounds good. And that was really all you had to say, right? If you had a pocket protector on and you were confident and you had a nice portfolio,
I forgot the pocket protector. That's where I went wrong.
Right. That's where you went wrong. Right. Yeah, football was a little alienating of a reference.
Well, I think, we could use the medical angle, right? Like the MSPs are the general practitioners, right?
Yes.
They're in charge of your healthcare, right? And an MSP's job is to be the trusted advisor in technology, right? And bridge the business needs into technical needs. And when it comes to cybersecurity, right, the MSP's job is to care and to make sure that the right solutions are to put in place, not to do everything, right?
Right.
And your general practitioner doesn't stick you on a treadmill, right, and stick probes in your heart, right?
Right. And they also can't walk
for that.
And they also can't walk on the treadmill for you, right? There's certain
Sure.
business practices, like, if it's people, processes, and technology, there's certain elements of your business as an MSP and their business as the client where you're going to have to go take your people asset and you're going to have to train them. There's going to have to be some kind of knowledge transfer there. And that's a hard thing to do. And some of us that are more technical, it might not come easy. So, I mean, these are all factors and angles of the reason why, if you don't come to the table with those skills, don't be afraid to go to a place that's going to give you the tools you need to be successful in the marketplace.
100%. You do owe it to yourself to be secure, but you owe it to yourself to sell a competitive cyber stack, but you are not under the obligation to internalize all of the responsibility of executing every single piece of the cybersecurity stack. It's
Right.
unreasonable, right?
Yep.
But us IT guys, we're so often such control freaks, you know. That's why we love this, because we love having the finger on the pulse of everything, and we think, well, everything, you know, the famous Jeff Bezos, everything I own, I can control, right? And so there's a school of thought that if you own it, internalize it, you can. But if you're in the $1 to $2 million mark, you've got 40 high volume clients, you're trying to grow, you do not have time
You're
to
not Superman.
develop that stack. If you do, it will be at the detriment of your development in revenue. It's either get really, really nerdy and fall down a deep rabbit hole of cybersecurity, or grow your business. Which one do you want?
Yeah. I think that's a great spot for us to pass it around and do last thoughts and then wrap it up for everybody. Jason, do you want to start us off?
Yeah,
Or-
you know,
Last
look,
thoughts and plugs, right?
yeah,
And-
yeah, right.
and
Jason,
plugs.
go.
Yeah, I like a lot about what Brian had to say. You know, having been in this business a long time, one of the most difficult things to do is to train somebody to be able to effectively sell technology and cybersecurity. Right? It is an incredibly challenging and rewarding thing to learn, because you are communicating with people who have no idea what the hell you're talking about.
You're touching a
And
life.
It's
you
the
know?
only black box in their business that they don't understand anything about. They hate that. They take it out on you, frequently. And it's the only business where you sit down in their quarterly business review and they've had no tickets and no real problems, and they say, we don't need you anymore because we haven't had any problems. No, I saved you from those problems. What are you talking about? So it's incredibly challenging. Look, for what we do, at the end of the day, like Brian's talking about, we are the cyber provider, white glove, fully transparent, so the client doesn't know we exist, doesn't need to. For those MSPs that recognize that they don't want to do it or have no business doing it, a lot of our clients come to us because they don't want the liability. And there's plenty of margin with every product they get from us to still make good money. If it wasn't, we wouldn't be in business and be successful. I think also, the key component that is by and large missing here, is making sure that you have a really tight, right, and enforceable, incident response plan, and that who's responsible for what, where, and when, and how. And that would really save a lot of MSPs from going out of business because of an incident. It really would.
80% of IT organizations that have an incident will go out of business within 6 months of the incident.
So,
Yeah.
so Jason, the new company brand is Future Safe, right? You were service provider partners, and you're moving on with the new brand, with the new product suite, right? Can you tell us anything else about your partner network and what it's like to join?
Yeah, so the name Future Safe, was earlier than the product. It was really more, what the hell is a service provider partner, right? So, Future Safe was something that we saw was a more appropriate description of what we do. But most of the products we sell are in enterprise, and this is something else that I'll tell you guys and is be very careful with. Is if you're using a channel only product, and that product is, has no independent vetting, no independent risk assessment, no independent penetration testing, no independent valuation of its capabilities or lack thereof, They don't have a compliance program. They can't provide you their compliance stack that you can then provide your client. I don't care how good it is. Be careful. Because if you do get in an arbitration hearing, you're going to have to justify why you made that decision to use that product with lack of any evidence to support your decision outside of yourself, right? And so that's why all of our products are in the enterprise space, because they're fully defensible, right? So be very, very careful about that. Outside of that, everything we do is a la carte, meaning you can pick and choose one thing, two things, 5 things, or 10 things, whatever works best for you. We're here to help architect and have conversations with you about what those needs are and help plug those gaps. And then we have partner relationships that we have with the likes of, Tech ID Manager for much easier credential management for all the downstream client stuff, or Mesa is another one, that we send folks to. And so we know what we don't do, and we vet folks in that vertical, and then we make a single reference to somebody who does it incredibly well. And our clients recognize that we do that vetting and we do that back end work. And when we do recommend a partner vendor, they know they can trust that we've done that work. Right? And, and we're not for everybody, I think at the end of the day, but, if there's an MSP out there, whatever size, and doesn't want the liability of trying to provide cybersecurity without a team of people, needs a white glove service or a architect. I have another architect on my team, a 20-year cyber, but in government and military, that thinks a little differently than I do. That can help architect your cyber, what you put forward to your clients. And, we can make cyber profitable for you. I would say if you're selling cyber and, look at your profitability, which is simply your fully burdened hourly rate multiplied by how many hours you spend managing the thing, subtract it from your gross margin. And if you're upside down, then, look for somebody. But the whole premise behind partnering with a white glove MSSP is that we're there to remove as much of the risk and liability from you as possible, and to put you in touch with the right vendor partners who can get you where you need to be. And, certainly, and I'm saying this because, because obviously the host of the live stream, but we've done our homework. There's just nobody better than Fort Mason. And I'll say this, Fort Mason came out of the blue. I had never heard of Fort Mason. And I told him when I first talked to him, I said, you guys, I don't know what kind of marketing you do. I never heard of you, but I should have. More mature than I had originally thought, and they're doing a great job.
Well, we really appreciate that.
That's
Jason.
why I agreed to come here today, right? It's been an hour. I'm super busy like everybody else, but I think it's super important.
We really appreciate it.
Yeah, you guys are doing great things. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Brian, you wanna spin us out here?
Yes, I'll give you my closing thought. You go to a doctor and you haven't been in 10 years, you got so much wrong with you. The doctor's not going to say, okay, next week, I need you to get a CAT scan, 4 MRIs, lose 70 pounds, go to the dentist. He's going to say, okay, let's set some priorities, make an action plan, and do the next right thing.
Yep.
If you are the MSP or MSSP and you need to catch people up with an incident response plan, think of this. Think of a client's cybersecurity roadmap. It's like a secondary incident response plan. This is the incident is you're behind. Let's make a roadmap and get you caught up manageably, equitably, affordably, and then you can implement all the things we've been talking about, the user education, the advanced cybersecurity pieces, build it all in place, because the truth is they're behind today. When you get involved that they're behind, it's not your fault that they're still behind tomorrow. And they are not going to swallow every pill in one gulp. But you can, the value you can provide for somebody in that situation is to give them a roadmap of what pills to take, what days, and in what order, and then you keep the ball moving. So for that reason, I think leverage these resources, but don't feel the need to throw every single tool at somebody in 5 seconds. That's probably why they're not buying it from you. Figure out what they need, the value that they do see in it, and build around the value that they understand, and then let the user education continue to help them understand and perceive the value moving forward, so that you can sell the more complex and more abstract pieces of the cyber stack offering. That's my big advice.
Well,
you want to learn more about? Go ahead.
Yeah, tell us. You got workshops and your groups, right?
Yeah, I have one in a couple of days. In 10 days, July 17th, we're doing it's $47. You spend 4.5 hours with me and a small group of MSPs, less than 10 MSPs, where we just talk about selling, sort of the scaling framework and how to sell complicated stuff. So I'd love to have you.
There are a lot of folks that I bet would pay well more than $47 to hang out with you. So
send me an invoice.
Yeah, I don't even think they know cyber. And
I might attend it myself for that.
With that, we're out of time here. So let me just give you the 5-second Fort Mesa camera juggle. So we help MSPs build a cybersecurity roadmap. We help you own that roadmap. We help you project manage through it. We help you inform the customer on why they should be investing in cybersecurity. We help you prove it. So that's what we do. We work with partners like FutureSafe to do services delivery. Many of our partners, get sales training from people like Brian. We're really big on customer success and making sure that people build those profitable cybersecurity business lines in a sustainable way. So that's who we are. Check us out on the web. And of course, compliance planning is central to that security, information security project management space. So with that, I think we're out of here, guys.
Check us out on YouTube for more good content if you enjoy.
Yeah, subscribe on YouTube. Watch us on LinkedIn.
Thanks, guys. Thank you so much.